Welcome everyone to the first episode of Fact or Fiction. In this video, we are going to examine 3 terrifying historical stories and events. Stay with us until the end. In 1940 in Russia, 5 prisoners of war were placed inside a sealed room where a special gas was being released, a gas designed to prevent them from sleeping. As long as you were inside that room, you couldn't fall asleep. The room had no windows, no glass, and was built completely sealed and dark. The 5 men were locked inside to stay awake for days, so the researchers could observe what happens to a person when they are forced to remain awake far beyond normal limits. This was an experiment they wanted to conduct at that time to see what would happen if those 5 soldiers were unable to sleep for 30 days, and what effects extreme sleep deprivation would have on their minds, their bodies, and their behavior. During the first 3 or 4 days, nothing unusual happened. They were simply exhausted, irritated, and increasingly restless. But slowly, strange things began to occur. By the 9th day, one of the soldiers suddenly began screaming. He screamed and screamed for so long that his vocal cords eventually failed. But this was only the beginning of what was to come. A few days after that incident, one of the prisoners made a disturbing decision. He tried to block the researchers' view by covering the observation window with something so horrifying that it could barely even be described, effectively preventing the cameras from seeing inside. After several more days, the scientists could no longer see inside the cell. They could only hear the sounds coming from within, but after some time, even the noises stopped. The cell fell into complete, unsettling silence. Aside from that, the oxygen consumption inside the cell suddenly increased, as if the people inside were engaging in intense physical activity and breathing heavily. So the scientists decided to announce to the prisoners that they were going to enter the cell. They ordered them to lie down on the floor and told them that if they cooperated, they would promise to release one of them. But what they heard in response was terrifying. The prisoners answered with a single, chilling statement: "We no longer need freedom." When the scientists heard that answer, they were shocked. They decided to first shut off the anti-sleep gas and then enter the cell. And what they saw inside was one of the most horrifying scenes ever recorded in a human experiment. The first thing they heard was the desperate voices of the prisoners, begging and pleading for the gas to be turned back on. They were crying, terrified. Then they saw the room. Most of the food inside was still untouched, almost completely unused. And that was when the scientists came face to face with a horrifying reality. All of the prisoners had torn pieces of their own bodies apart. The extreme sleep deprivation had driven them into a state of psychosis, a madness that pushed them into self-mutilation and cannibalistic behavior. Out of the 5 men, one had already become a victim of cannibalism. After that, all the remaining prisoners were taken to a hospital, but none of them survived. And to this day, the Russian sleep experiment remains one of history's darkest and most mysterious cases. The Cinder Woman story is one of the strangest incidents ever recorded, and to this day, no definitive explanation has been found for what happened. What do you think this woman was called the Cinder Woman? Because one day, just like any other ordinary day, a neighbor called the police and reported that a strong smell of burning had been coming from Mary's house for several hours. When the authorities arrived and opened Mary's door, they were faced with something that has happened only once in recorded history. Mary had been sitting on her couch living her life like any normal person, but when the police entered her home, they were confronted with something unbelievable. Mary had exploded from the inside, and her entire body had been blown into tiny, unrecognizable pieces, except for one part, her leg. That single intact leg made the scene even more disturbing. But what was even stranger was this: Mary's entire apartment was perfectly untouched. Nothing around her had burned, melted, or been damaged in any way. Only Mary herself had been destroyed. To this day, scientists have no definitive explanation for this case because it happened only once in recorded history. But the real question is, if this incident truly happened, even once, could it happen again? Could you or I suddenly combust where we sit without warning? The third story is even more terrifying than the previous two. It is the story of a girl named Mania who fell in love with a boy, and the two had a secret relationship for 5 months. But because of family conflicts, Mania was locked away by her mother and imprisoned in a basement room for 22 years. We will share the full story in part 2 of this video. If you enjoyed this video and want more content like this, make sure to like the video and subscribe to my channel.